All right, this is marketing ROI. Marketing ROI is so important. I've seen this work, and when it's done right, it is literally like a rocket launch, like a SpaceX Heavy Falcon shooting to the sky for campaigns, for companies themselves, but also for careers. So this is huge. My marketing career went from being a marketing manager, marketing specialist, all the way to being a VP of marketing in something like 3 years or less, because I answered the marketing ROI question for the leadership and our campaigns were efficient. So I want to share with you the things I've learned, the things we've learned from all the other people we work with, and this is going to be a good one. So to start off, let us do a quick poll. Let's go ahead and launch this poll. All right. Do you know where your revenue driving leads come from? Are you using connected campaigns? And have you done a CSI yet? If so, what is your score? Definitely fill this thing out. I'm going to customize this for you based on your response. So go ahead and answer that real quick. Let a few more people answer this and see what we get. All right. So the answer is yes, we do know where our revenue generating leads come from. Some have a no, and some have using connected campaigns, no. Good, we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about how to get that set up, or more specifically, what to get set up. And then finally, have you done a CSI? Not yet is the answer. Well, that's cool. We're gonna talk about that. Great, thank you all for taking that. Appreciate it. Let's get cranking. So, hello, if you haven't met me, I am your mission control for today. My name is Casey Cheshire, longtime marketer, a little bit of a marketing astronaut and scientist. For today's theme, we're going to have a space theme today, because come on, too many boring webinars out there. So let's have fun with this one. And I think I just look good in a spacesuit. So a little bit about me, 9, that's the number of years I've worked with Pardot. It's almost 10. I like it at 9 because it doesn't make me feel as old. But I've been working with Pardot for a long time, Pardot and other marketing automation platforms. So lots of experience there. I can't wait to share the stories with you. 2,200, that's the number of Pardot implementations we've done here at Chesh. And so many experiences come from that. The right ways to do things, the wrong way to do things, companies and organizations that do set up ROI tracking, the results they get, as well as those that don't do it and how that can go crazy. Finally, 34, any guesses? That is not how old I am, but thank you. That is actually how many skydives I've done, and I look forward to making that number jump dramatically this spring. But I'm always happy to talk about skydiving and about marketing. So let's get cranking. All right, mission control here. Today's mission plan at T-minus 10 seconds. We're going to examine the question, the CSI question, and we're going to talk about this. We have a maturity model, and number 2 on that maturity model is to know your ROI, your marketing ROI. So we're going to talk about that first. You got to understand what we're going for in the first place, and then things like connected campaigns and all these other things tie into it. Multi-touch reporting, all that comes into play. Next, after that, T-minus 9 seconds, we're going to talk about some stories. These are success stories, but they didn't start out success stories. So when things go wrong related to ROI, we'll talk about that, but also then how it goes right. And I mentioned earlier at the beginning that my career just shot into the sky based on understanding ROI. This is exactly what I want to have happen with you. Our company why here is to make marketers heroes. So if you're on this webinar or listening to it afterward, the recording, that's our whole goal here. We're trying to sell you anything, trying to make you heroes, okay? So also stories around shooting your company into the stratosphere when you get those ROI results, because you can actually be much more efficient with your marketing. Then we'll jump into the Pardot quick tech. Got to do this. It's so important to do ROI reporting, and so many people don't have this set up. We're going to dive in there quickly. Those of you who have this set up, it'll be like kind of a review. Make sure all the boxes are checked. Those that haven't, you're going to want to pay attention, because I need you to get this set up as soon as possible. And then finally, we're going to talk about connected campaigns at T-minus 3 seconds. This is the hot topic right now. That's why it's in the middle, so you can't skip out or whatnot. But it's right in the middle. It's very important to talk about this because we're merging Salesforce and Pardot campaigns together, and you can see how all that works. Multi-touch, where does this come into play? It's actually later on in the maturity model, but let's talk about where it all fits. And then finally, a little resource check, talk about who we can follow up with for additional resources. ignition liftoff, and then we'll have Q&A. Sound good? All right, as always, any questions for the Q&A, actually feel free to throw them out at any point. I'd like to make this way more interactive than most webinars. Again, most webinars boring, very dry, very almost like hospitals, right? Not that hospitals are bad, but like let's liven this thing up. Let's get some bean bags out and the beer's on tap, and let's have a good time here. So any questions, any comments, just throw them into the chat, throw them in the Q&A interface, and we'll get right to it. All right, this is actually a diagram from NASA when they did the moon landings. Of course, they had schematics and they had written plans, but they also had these really cool pictures. And so this is actually almost like a cartoon that shows when they did the NASA landing, what has to happen first, what has to happen second, third, fourth, fifth, right? And you don't want to mess up that order. Imagine if you tried to turn the lunar lander while the rocket was still firing. Imagine if you separated and you weren't on trajectory yet, you send all your oxygen out in the wrong direction, right? Very important to go in the right order. So they had a whole plan, they had a whole schematic for it. Same thing in marketing. Very important to go in the right order. A lot of times, and I've been guilty of this, hey, what was that? Marketing, right? We're all like the next shiny thing, the next glittery strategy or cool app that you want to buy. We can get distracted by things. And unfortunately, or fortunately, marketing automation has like 80,000 things you can do. So very distracting. And so oftentimes what happens is people are not really sure where to go next or what to do next. And they're asking us, hey, we're working together, Trish. We love that you're executing our stuff. We need that strategic advice too. And we say, you got it. And so what this is it's a roadmap. It's kind of like a flight plan, if you will, kind of sticking with the theme here. So it's a strategic roadmap. Some might call it a maturity model. And there's 10 steps to it. And there are 10 steps, and it's also an assessment, right? Wait, there's more. It's an assessment. So what it is, there's 10 questions, and all we have to do, we sit down, and I guess we're all sitting down or standing up, but we get on a call, and we go through 10 questions, and the outcome of doing this with you is you're going to have 3 things. You're going to know, 1, where you're at with marketing automation. These 10 questions tie into strategies and tie into features and things you should be using in marketing automation. And what's cool is they're actually in order, just like NASA. Because what we don't want you to do, and this happens a lot, people jump right to multi-touch tracking. But guess what? There's no touches to track. So how do you do that? You can't, right? And so in order to save yourself the frustration of doing something later on that maybe you need some prep work done ahead of time, that's why we have the CSI. It's called the CSI, the Cheshire Success Index. That acronym was just way too good to pass up, so we went for it. So first of all, you'll know where you're at, a number from 0 to 10. You're also going to know your next step. And this is so important. People are just like, this is what I really need to know. It's nice to know where you're at, but then also, where do I go from here? You're going to know your very next step because it's your lowest number on the roadmap that's incomplete. So you might have scores across the whole thing, but then you want to go back to the lowest number that's incomplete. Very simple. And finally, you're going to know what a 10 looks like. You're going to know what it looks like to land on the freaking moon with marketing automation. You're going to have that maximized view of how to actually use the tool. Very inspiring stuff. So that's the CSI. And the reason we bring this up is because today's webinar is all about CSI number 2, which is source ROI reporting. And each one of these has a question. So very similar to when we sit down and we do the CSI together. And for those of you who said not yet, let's do this. So that's like the follow-up to this webinar. All the different takeaways you're going to get from this. Let's do the CSI together. I'm happy to do it as well. Love to chat with you on it, and it's free. So can't say no to that. All right. So the question here for CSI is, do you know where your revenue driving leads come from? We asked this earlier on the poll. Many of you said yes. Many more of you actually said no, and that's pretty common. A pretty common challenge that we bump into. And oftentimes, where is that revenue coming from? Doing a lot of different actions, we don't know which ones are actually successful. And this is not necessarily, we're not trying to say like which nurturing campaign is most effective, which touch is effective. We're trying to say first touch. Like, did you acquire these people at a trade show? Did you get them from PPC? And do you know how much you spent on them? And then how much they actually bought in the end. Now, if you connect things up in Pardot correctly, you can actually see it inside. And we're going to look at that in just a little bit. So that is the CSI question. That's what we're trying to answer today. All right, let's talk about the success stories so we can be in mission control here with a pumped fist and an excitement on our face as we've landed the lunar rocket or whatnot. First up, the blog battle. So I got to tell you, the blog battle is very interesting. Do you like content? I love content. And we had, a couple years ago, 2 different blogs for Cheshire Impact because we just love content. And the blogs were interesting because they were 2 different buyer personas we were really going after, not intentionally. We didn't even know this at the time. We just had 2 different fields, 2 different kinds of blogs. And they were both operating at the same time. We invested in one and not in the other. So here's some information. Try if you can to not look at the bottom section here. I could do PowerPoint magic, but hey, we're all adults here. So blog A versus blog B. What's the deal, right? Blog A, tons of visitors, insane. You could even call it viral oftentimes. Blog B, steady. And whatever numbers, and these are rough numbers, right? Not 1,000 on the nose, but roughly 1,000. Substitute your own numbers for this kind of thing too. So one blog had a lot of visitors, one blog not so many visitors. One blog with a lot of visitors, we're actually paying money. We are investing, we're having people write into it, we're promoting it, all sorts of different things. Second blog, we're actually not spending any money on it at all. We're not a dime. It's all an internal effort. Internal people were writing it. Many of the people that you probably work with, if you're working with us right now, awesome Cheshire rock stars were writing the articles, myself included. We're having a good time with it. And then look at the results down below. And we only had this from connecting the ROI tracking. If we hadn't done this, we wouldn't have this information. Specifically, what we did is we had 2 different campaigns set up in Pardot to be able to show the differences. We actually used different page tracking code. So if you landed on blog A, you were tracked as one thing. If you landed on blog B, you were tracked as the other. So we had 2 different tracking codes, and that allowed us to see, if we acquired you, where did you come from first? Check out blog A. That's the busy one, right? The one that get all the attention, all the noise, and of course, all the money. Barely, anything for opportunities, meaning, we're sending leads over, but like they're not actually leads. People just wanted help learning Pardot, with like flashcards and stuff, and that's totally cool. But the revenue was 0, and eventually it grew to 2,000, a little bit higher than that afterward, but for the most part, it was almost always 0 every time we looked at it. Blog B, on the other hand, we had a lot of revenue coming in from it, lots of opportunities that were turning into revenue. And this is in like the tens of thousands, not 10, it was a much higher number than that, but like a lot of return revenue from 0. And so when we saw these 2 side by side, we're like, okay, we gotta change our strategy up here. This blog B hasn't been getting enough attention, but it's actually doing a great job. What more can we do here? Where can we invest that blog A money in to either make blog B better or spend that money on other things? Awesome. Quick poll. We won't have to do the thing, but go ahead and just throw it in chat or throw it in Q&A. Any interfaces? Does anyone do events out there? Do you do any event marketing? Okay, a couple people. Private message, public message, whatever. Okay, so we got some event folks. Yep. Events definitely seem to be one of those things that everyone does. And if not, events, trade shows, meetups, user groups, there's nothing quite like meeting up with people. Well, there's one client that we're working with who was actually hostage to these events. Imagine that. It's like they're being held hostage by all these events they were doing. They're actually doing roughly 80 events a year. And that's a lot, by the way, for even a large company. That's a lot of events to do because, the booth is flying out there. They're sending sales staff out there, and they want to stay in their own hotel chain and whatever, right? All these different logistics all going on for 80 trade shows a year. Crazy. So they're doing this, and they're spending lots of money, but guess what? They came to us, and they had no idea which one of these events was working or not. No idea. 0 idea. They had kind of gut feel, I think this one's effective based on how much money they were spending, but they really didn't know, was this one returning events? And the crazy thing is, some of them were working. So because of it, they knew they were getting leads. They were getting leads that turned into business. They were closing deals. So something was working, but year after year, they'd been doing more and more events and not knowing which ones were flops and which ones they shouldn't do or they should do. No idea. So it was one of the first things we did with them. And that's, again, why it's CSI number 2. It's so important to do early on. So we set up ROI tracking with them, and wouldn't you know, it's almost like a cliche story, or like it's so weird. Any guesses? So just any guesses? You can hold up your hands, and I'll pretend I see them. Any guesses? How many of those 80 events do you think were effective? Any guesses? Kind of formulate it. You could write it down if you want, but go ahead and guess. Out of 80 trade shows this one company was doing, how many of them were actually effective? Okay, got a couple guesses. Some of you are close. Some of you are very optimistic. The answer is actually 30. They were only about 30 of these events. Once we had ROI tracking set up, only about 30 of these events were actually returning positive ROI, meaning they were closing deals, and enough deals that paid all the expenses of getting the booth and the event space and all the travel and all that. Only 30 of the 80 events were actually productive. Crazy, right? So that meant there was 50 events they were sending people to and coordinating that were completely rubbish. And this wasn't like a quick decision too. We not only set it up, but we wanted them to wait. And they actually waited twice the length of their average sales cycle to make sure it wasn't just people were really like early in the process. No, it wasn't the case. Some of these events were just bad events to go to. And so the good news is they were able to take that money that they were wasting essentially on 50 events, and they were able to double down on some of the more successful events, bump up their sponsorship, get a bigger booth, do a little more promotions, maybe some more dinners at those events, and then take the rest of the money and go elsewhere and do PPC, do some more content syndication, some other lead sources. Finally, on the career side. So early on in the career, I was your standard digital marketer, and ROI was like a dream and a wish and a prayer. I'd love to get it, but I can't get it. Why? Because all we really had at the time was Google Analytics and some landing page software, and you would try to guess, right? The problem was Google doesn't want to help you with this. They want their data to be anonymous. They don't want you to track per person. They'd rather you just see trends, like, oh, people that go through this path tend to convert, much more B2C. So for a B2B marketer, really challenging. So enter marketing automation. And the experience where I first had marketing automation, I was at this, I left this big agency to run marketing for a small but growing consulting, training, methodology, software type company. That's an interesting description. So here I am, the marketer. I'm like the only marketer, the one person shop. And what was I seen as, right? Well, when I first got there, it was gross. You had to fill out a 12-field form just to get the newsletter. Then we'd send you over to sales, and they'd call you, and you didn't want to talk to them, right? So leads were horrible in quality. Sales didn't even know who marketing was. They didn't even know the other person got, left, and I came in like, who's this guy? Oh, he's in marketing. Oh, okay, right? This happens a lot. Marketing is seen as what they call a cost center. That's like a financial term just to say, look, you spend money and you don't actually benefit the company at all. You're just sort of a necessary evil, right? That's what a lot of marketing is. Now, some departments maybe are there, but marketing is not one of those. It really isn't. It's a revenue driving department, a revenue driving organization in a company. But you got to be able to be seen that way. Otherwise, you're the print shop for sales. And I bumped into one company. They were in accounting and finance, and their sales rep saw them as the print shop. Like, oh, you got some more flashy cardboard for us, or some cool, magazines or catalogs we can send out and hand out. They weren't seen as a partner in this whole experience. Enter ROI. Set up Pardot at this one company, got things cranking, nurturing's happening, ROI starts happening. We start seeing certain trade shows are working, certain events and content syndication's working, lead quality starts going higher and higher and higher. As soon as I was able to answer that ROI question, I got more budget. And this is a magical thing. Normally you ask for more budget for marketing, and the CEO or the head of, whatever department you report to will say, more money? Are you crazy? I was actually hoping to cut some of your budget this year. But when you show, look, we spent $10,000 here, or even $5 whatever, or 50,000, whatever your number is for what your company size is, we spent $10,000 here, and then look, all the leads we got from there turned into $500,000 or $1 million worth of deals down here, right? When you can show that math, and I was able to show that in this situation. Look, we spent this much money and this is what we got out of it. And of course, it wasn't just all marketing. These are leads that sales closed. So it's team effort here, but they closed them. And that's amazing. And so because of that, CEO was like, all right, cool. Well, here's another 10. And actually, if I gave you 20, could you do that times 2? Right? And then you get kind of like, oh no, like, can I make this thing scale 2, 3, 5x? Well, let's find out, right? But it's a good problem to have. So the budgets open up. I also mentioned that once I started taking ownership of the money we were spending in marketing, that's when my career started to elevate, because we weren't just taking the money being a cost center. We were taking the money and investing it and showing, here's what your return is. Sometimes there wasn't a return. So we got rid of those campaigns quickly, and then we spent the money somewhere else. And that marketing career just went into the sky. Finally, it's kind of funny, but sales at the beginning, I mentioned, they didn't even know who I was. They didn't even know marketing was in that company. Fast forward, high quality leads, things are cranking, ROIs in place, and sales is specifically asking me to come out with them to lunch. Hey man, let's buy you some lunch. We want to buy you some sushi. Come on out, have a good time with us. And that's just one of the many things that happens when you start getting really efficient with those campaigns and you set up ROI. All right, let's get technical real quick. Take a little bit of a pivot here, talk a little bit of that tech, a little bit about Pardot, and just get into the weeds here. If you don't have Pardot, well then you should get Pardot, but you can kind of see if any of these features relate to the marketing automation system you're using. All right, first of all, before we can even show you a screenshot of Pardot, let's just address this, the word campaign. How many times have you used the word campaign today or this week? It's only Tuesday. Usually a lot. It gets overused in marketing, and I will admit it too. We use the word all the time, and I got to tell you, there's so many definitions of this. In the Marine Corps, it's actually the name of a hat. The drill instructors wear this thing, and they yell at people. So it's the name of a hat. But in marketing, of course, we use it to generally describe an effort we're undertaking. It might be an effort that has multiple different things involved: landing pages, emails, follow-up emails, maybe a webinar associated with it, a CSI campaign or whatnot. It's also it's almost like a folder that we can put all these actions into it. But in Pardot, that's not what it means. In Pardot, it means your first touch or your source. So your Pardot campaign is your first touch source, which would be, I found you at a webinar, or I found you at a trade show, or I found you via pay-per-click, right? So it would be the original source the person came from. In Salesforce, it means something entirely different, right? This is why we talk about these sort of things. In Salesforce, it's actually a multiple touch. So in Pardot, you can only have one campaign, one Pardot campaign. But in Salesforce, you can be in multiple Salesforce campaigns. It's very interesting. Campaigns in Salesforce are on the rise. They've had a rebound. They were originally created, Pardot wasn't here, and no one even used them because they were like, oh, what do we use this for? Marketing's not even involved here, and they don't really work very well. But you add in Pardot, now they're starting to make some sense. We're going to talk about connected campaigns next, in the next section. So Salesforce, you can be multiple campaigns. Got it. Now, first touch, Pardot campaigns, marketing campaigns. Very important to go there. And you'll note, even if you haven't set them up, you'll see a section. I know a lot of you haven't set them up yet. You'll see a section in there that talks about ways you could start using them. And there's things everywhere from using Excel. There's a bit of a wizard, bulk connect, and then also just connecting them individually, which if you only have 2, that's fine. But otherwise, it can be really tedious. There's different options for this. But let's just talk about it. Pardot campaigns. By default, if you didn't already know this, and again, if you already know this, I'm just kind of helping you get all glossed up for that certification. But if you don't know this, it's very important. So the default campaign for a prospect coming in is website tracking. And that doesn't mean your website drove all these leads. It just means they weren't tracked to whatever their actual source was. So the goal is actually to get that website tracking to be far less than it was when you first implemented Pardot. When you first started, maybe that was the only campaign you had, but eventually you want to build out campaigns. So if they come from PPC, if they come from AdWords, you're tracking it with AdWords. If they come from somewhere else or an event, you want to upload them, and the campaign should really be called, like, Dreamforce 2018. What you don't want to see, and every now and then we see this, if say, hey, let's go ahead and look at your campaigns window if we're doing a screen share, and I see campaigns that say things like May 2018 email blast, right? That's not it. What that is confusing the hat with the marketing, with the Pardot. If it says something of a single time and it's all about an action, like an email, you didn't acquire people on the email. You acquired their email some other way, maybe on a list, whatever it is, right? Hey, we did a list from Inside View. We put that into Pardot. So then that's your source, is that list. And then the action you're taking, that's not tracked by a Pardot campaign. That'd be tracked by a Salesforce campaign. All right, many ways to actually tag someone for a Pardot campaign. Not everyone knows this either, because again, these things get overlooked. Very important to do these things. And the whole reason this is critical, and the power of Pardot is, without these Pardot campaigns, you would have to wait for someone to fill out a form. But what happens if you just spent $20 on a click from AdWords? Someone gets to your site, they're browsing around, they're like, maybe later, right, distracted. And then they come back a couple weeks later, they just browse, they just type your website, and they actually fill out a form. Well, without Pardot, that form would say, okay, the source is Google, or the source is just your website. But you wouldn't have any way of tracking the fact that you invested in that person many, many weeks ago to get them to have the original click. So that's the important part, because they're cookied with Pardot. And when they're cookied, it's magic. And so one of the ways you can tag them and tag that cookie early on, even before they filled out a form, is the URL. So any inbound link to your website, you can tag it with a Pardot campaign. It's just a little parameter in the URL. Nobody even notices it. So it's like www.yourthing.com/your address, with a little question mark, PI equals, and then the campaign. And there's a little code, you just throw it in there, and if somebody hits that URL and they don't already have a first touch campaign in Pardot, boom, they're tagged. Because of that, that'll follow them forever. And you want that because it's their first touch campaign. You want to know where they came from, especially if they purchase later on. Page as well. So I mentioned earlier, we were tagging the two different blogs separated out by their pages. So if you hit one blog, the page was tracked by one thing, and the other blog is tracked by a different thing. So every campaign, you may not know this, every campaign actually has a separate tracking code. So you can literally track a microsite versus your own site versus a partner site, blog A, blog B, the European site, even geos can be tagged differently. So you have all sorts of ways of tagging them. Page tagging for sure is a great one. Forms, of course, they fill out a form, you can tag them with something, but typically the form isn't how they got there. It's usually before the form is what the actual source was. Finally, rules. If they came in through this channel and it's not properly tagged, go ahead and change the tag and name them this. You can set up rules. And finally, when you do upload, I mentioned like, hey, I uploaded someone from Inside View, a whole list of people. Well, make sure when you do those uploads, you're specifying what their source is, their Pardot campaign. And when you do that, it'll follow them forever. It's awesome. Okay. So on the report section, we're hitting campaign. We're scrolling down by this thing. It's still there. After all these years, this chart is still there. It was put on there a long time ago to compete with another app who had a squiggly chart. No one actually really uses it, but scroll down, that's where the magic's at. And when you scroll down, you'll see something listed out like this. Or hopefully you'll see many things listed out like this. And this is actually the way you want to do it. So you can see on here at the bottom, you have a whole row of information, and you have a particular campaign on the left, visitors, prospects assigned, the amount spent, the opportunities generated. All these different columns are actually the different layers of your funnel. So if you think about that vertical funnel that marketing loves to talk about, visitor, you have visitors, you have named people as prospects. Assigned means they've engaged enough to be an MQL, to be sent over to sales. So assigned is essentially your MQLs. Opportunities, that's when not only did sales receive it, but they've actually accepted the lead and created an opportunity for it. So opportunities is your SAL, your sales accepted leads. And what's really cool is that value and that revenue and ROI. Note to self, if you are going for that certification for Pardot, you may want to remember the headings of these particular columns that may come into play, maybe. So value, revenue, ROI. Value is actually the amount in the opportunities that have been created just based on those opportunities. Now, what's really important to use throughout all of these things is you need to use contact roles in your opportunities. Gets a little technical on you, but one thing is that when sales receives a lead, there's a cool button where they're able to basically promote that lead and automatically they call it convert that lead or promote that lead into a contact with an associated account and associated opportunity, all with just clicking one button, and then boom, there you go. That's the most efficient way to do it. People that complain that, oh, leads just one more step in the way, then I got to create a contact, an account. No. Just do a lead, then convert it, and it does all that stuff for you. When you do that, it'll automatically fill out the contact role for you. It's only when you're creating a new opportunity without this process, you need to make sure contact roles are required in your organization, because that's how Pardot is able to get this dollar information and feed it back into your campaign reports. And again, it's only first touch, so it means you first found people through this thing. And what's cool about this, if you think about this, when you have a whole page of all these different campaigns, it's like you have multiple mini funnels. You're able to see the macro funnel, of course, but you're also able to see how do people go from top to bottom, from start to finish on every different one of my sources. Do people get hung up? If they come from PPC, do they get hung up midway through? Or if people come from organic, do they have any challenges? Where are the friction points for each and every one of these sources? It's a sweet thing. I love it. It's like a Diet Dr. Pepper commercial all over again. So much fun. All right. Let's get connected. Connected campaigns, all the rage, really important. But let's talk about what this all is, right? So we mentioned earlier that Pardot has, you can only have one campaign, and Salesforce, you can have many campaigns. One of the things we do, even here at our organization, is we say, look, if you're going to say the word campaign, you need to actually specify what kind of campaign you're talking about. So oftentimes you'll hear us say marketing campaign, or we'll say Pardot campaign or Salesforce campaign, because without saying that first part, you could be saying a hat, right? You could be talking about a hat or or an effort or a first touch or a multi-touch. You have no idea what you're talking about. So always specifying. So that can get confusing. And so one of the things that Salesforce is doing, which I think is brilliant because it starts to get to some more of the advanced reporting, is they're helping resolve the issues between first touch and multi-touch. And we're doing that with what they call connected campaigns. All it is creating a one-to-one connection between Pardot campaigns and Salesforce campaigns. It doesn't break any of the rules of either. So that's really important to remember. It doesn't mean now you can be in multiple Pardot campaigns or you can only be in one Salesforce campaign. It doesn't break any of that. You can still only be in one Pardot campaign. Pardot campaigns are still only your lead source, right? Your first touch source. But now they get to play in the overall realm of the connected campaigns of every multiple source and every other touch that happens. Because we know someone comes in, but then we know there's many other touches before they actually buy. So by doing this, you don't have to duplicate as much work. And so what's funny is as a benefit, you'll see all the other documentation and even sales collateral to say this and that, but mostly it's less work. Doing Salesforce campaigns can be a lot more work, as well as doing Pardot campaigns. Most people don't do either. So this is one way of doing one, and you basically cover two bases at the same time. So you're able to actually create a Pardot campaign and have it automatically create a resulting Salesforce campaign. Is usually the way to do it, and just make sure they're married up one-to-one. So really what you also get out of that is this unified picture, right? Instead of like Pardot has first touch and Salesforce is over here, it's kind of like everything now is united. And then finally, the last thing I was mentioning is that you get that advanced reporting, the ability to get to advanced reporting at the end. So you saw this earlier in one of the screenshots, when you're setting up connected campaigns for the first time, and we're not necessarily going to get into the super weeds on this right now, but we do want to address it. And if you have any questions, Q&A, or also just ping the people, your Chesh point of contact. We're totally happy. We do workshops on this. We help people set it up all the time. But I'll give you a couple tips on that. So there's a couple of different ways of doing that. But before you do anything, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not do anything until you clean up your Pardot campaigns first. Normally people don't have Salesforce campaigns to worry about, or if they are, they're mostly archived, or it's not usually the problem. The problem is the Pardot campaigns. If you've been using them like marketing campaigns, it's time to stop doing that, and then also start cleaning them up. You can archive them, or you just straight up get rid of them, because what we really want is those Pardot campaigns need to be your first touch. And so Usually a great way to start Excel or Google Sheets, not even to connect them, but just to understand and clean them up. What do I actually have in here? Who are my sources? Mapping that out is like an exercise that may take 10 minutes, half an hour, but 100% worth it. That's why it's CSI number 2, to understand what are the different ways people can come into the system. Because what you need to do is think about, am I tagging them properly? Do people get into the system, they're still associated with website tracking? If so, there's some more work you need to do before you can even think about connecting to Salesforce campaigns. Once you do, and once you have that spreadsheet you've already done to prepare your product campaigns, it's very easy then, and we can show you, but it's very easy to then use these tools to then say, here's all my product campaigns, export. Let's create matching ones in Salesforce. And this can go down a little bit of a spiral of nested and hierarchies in your Salesforce campaigns, because there's hierarchies, there's child, and there's all sorts of dependence on different things. There's a lot of power to it, so it can get a little overwhelming. So don't worry, like ping us on that. We can kind of dive in, roll up our sleeves, and get in there in the nitty gritty with you. But it is a cool exercise to go through. Totally recommend, though, that you make sure you get your product campaigns in order first. Get those in an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheet, so you know where your sources are coming from at the very beginning. Notice on this chart here, there's a spot on the right-hand side, connect to CRM campaign. You're going to start seeing this now, the ability to not only create your campaign here, but also connect to what the campaign is in your CRM. Now, I 100% recommend you actually make sure they're named the exact same thing. Otherwise, you're going to just be decoding things. And some folks have actually had issues when they're not named the same things. But just best practice, name them the same thing, and then start on the part outside, and then go from there. Finally, just a quick chart. When you do use campaign influence, it's really kind of cool. So this is sort of the byproduct of doing all that work on first touch campaigns and also all the Salesforce campaigns. You can start getting this type of data. And this is actually B2BMA. That's a part add-on. And we had actually a great question earlier asking, well, do you need B2BMA to do campaign influence? And no, you don't. You can actually get your standard Salesforce reporting without B2BMA. But when you get B2BMA, you get charts like this. You can actually click into a circle, it dives in, it expands it, and shows you who's in that, and you can run further reports. So really cool stuff. All right, let's step to the lake for a moment, put our toy rocket down, and talk about multi-touch reporting. So, oftentimes, we'll do consulting and we'll encounter a marketing team that is trying to get to multi-touch reporting, usually before they should be. And a lot of this comes from trying to justify ourselves at all in the organization, right? Why is marketing here? Well, marketing's here because we help you close more deals. We get leads for you, and then our campaigns, they're all helping you sell more deals. But someone might say, well, prove it, right? And then we're like, well, here's this multi-touch. The challenge is that multi-touch can be a gray area. In fact, Matt Sweezy, evangelist, thought leader, I once chatted with him about it, and he thinks multi-touch is complete BS. Or at least he did before B2BMA. But like the idea of it can be very fickle and very gray area. So it's not actually the place to start when you're trying to justify and get yourself out of that print shop for sales, getting yourself out of being a cost center. The place to start is with ROI tracking, your first touch ROI. So when you look at the CSI, that roadmap, right? NASA's launching to the moon, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 2 is first touch reporting, which is what we're talking about right now. Number 10 is multi-touch reporting. Why? Because a lot of times people don't have touches to report on. They don't have alignment with sales. They don't have the different things that come between 2 and 10 that make 10 really beneficial. So eventually, when you have a whole bunch of touches happening, a bunch of different kinds of touches, collateral, webinars, recordings, in-person events, all different kind of touches happening, that's when it's real magic to do multi-touch reporting. And if you've got a lot of all that set up, it might be the time to talk about multi-touch. But you got to make sure you nail ROI first. Why? Because that's actually what gets you that justification, so that you get people not only off your back, but now they start investing more into marketing. So all in all, first things first, do the first touch ROI first, And then Connected Campaigns actually helps you set things up to have the data for multi-touch. So I would still go ahead and do Connected Campaigns. That's why we're talking about it in this webinar. Do some of these things you need to do to set up multi-touch for success later. Data is another thing. So ROI is number 2. Cleaning up your data and creating your data so that it's actually reportable and free of duplicates is CSI number 3. That's our next one coming up. That's also really critical, because if you try to do multi-touch and your data's not clean, you're getting nothing. You might not even get a result or answers on the chart, or if you do, it's not something you can trust. So first things first, definitely do the ROI. It helps you justify the investment versus the spending, that cost center we were talking about. You're also not going to be hostage to any events or to any of your lead sources. And then finally, you need those touches to track, like we were saying. T-minus 1 second. The engines are in automatic. Blast off is about to occur. Quick resource check here. Jennifer Snyder, amazing thought leader in the Pardot ecosystem. You can reach out to her on Twitter, Jen Talk to Me, as well as there's a simplified email address for her there, jennifer@CheshireImpact.com. Amazing. Now, she was on the Hardcore Marketing Show. If you haven't already heard of this thing and you do check out podcasts, or if you've never done a podcast before or never heard of one, it's definitely the one to check out. You can hit up on YouTube if you want to see faces like this one and this one over here on your screen, or should I point that way? It's awesome. So I talked to Jennifer on the Hardcore Marketing episode number 42. So if you just do Hardcore Marketing and then 42 on YouTube, you'll see that pop up. If you do it on Google, you can actually see it. It's on iTunes, Stitcher, all those kind of things. You definitely want to check her out. She's an amazing resource. So follow her on Twitter. We've had people just create Twitter accounts just to follow Jen. It's amazing. Awesome resource on this. She breathes Connected Campaign. We even prepared ahead of time, and we talked about it before this webinar. Check her out. There's a great FAQ doc that Pardot put together, and sometimes content be kind of wonky, but I highly recommend this particular one. Pardot.com/training/connected-campaigns-FAQ. It's a good one. I actually like that one. Has some good details, some good nitty gritty when it comes to setting up Connected Campaign. But of course, just ping us on the Chesh team. We're here doing it all day long, enjoying it, and promise we'll make it fun. It doesn't have to be this sort of arduous task of creating campaigns. And finally, reach out to me anytime. Casey Chesh on Twitter, as well as Casey for email address. So definitely hit me up, and Jen as well. All right, liftoff. T-0, liftoff, ignition. Shooting that rocket up into space. So this webinar has been a part of our series with Cheshire Impact. So if you don't already know Cheshire Impact, we are here to help you be successful with marketing automation and Salesforce. And so the biggest call to action I can tell you is let's get that CSI scheduled. So you already have one, and a lot of you didn't have one. A lot of you do, and that's great. I know you're going on to your next step now. But if you don't already have that, let's get you that so you at least have a number of where you're at, where you're going, what a 10 looks like. And what's really cool is then once you know where you're at on the CSI, we actually have specific workshops that we do on each one of these elements. So Connected Campaign, ROI, content, data workshops, all the data hierarchy, you name it, understanding where you're at. And then we have specific things to help you improve that CSI score. So you can go back to leadership and say, look, we've doubled our effectiveness. We went from a 2 to a 4 to a 6. We've doubled, tripled our effectiveness with marketing automation. Couple quick updates. We also have a book coming out on marketing automation. We're going to be sending out an email soon about signing up for the book team. So I love your help. Love to hear your stories around the different elements of the CSI. Not going to overload you with every chapter, but what I'll do is I'll actually send you, you can pick your favorite topic of all the CSI, and I'll send you the chapter we have and see what you think, and love to hear your feedback. And finally, check out that podcast, Hardcore Marketing Show, interviewing amazing people, thought leaders, CMOs, authors and marketing books who are just schooling me. And and if you want that education, that strategy, just go ahead and sign up for those. Again, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. Love Spotify, as well as on YouTube. All right. With that, let's go ahead and dive into Q&A.